So I work in the provost's office. I'm a director of assessment. I'm often talking to department heads, if not to you directly, about what are students learning in your program. We try to monitor that and try to say, can we tell the story of what our students are learning here? I think of that fondly as my day job, because I spend a lot of time doing that all year round throughout the campus. But one of the other things I do is I manage something we call the Senior Exit Survey. And every one of our undergraduates, when they come to the point of graduation, when they think they're filing to graduate, first they come to a screen that asks them about 10 questions on their undergrad experience. It is optional, and they don't have to take it. There's a point on the bottom. We were very careful that on a single screen, at the bottom of the screen, it says continue without taking the survey. But 95% of them answer it. And so we have a pretty good data set of a few simple perceptions that students have of their experience. We have lots of breadth. You'll see how much depth we have. It tells us a little bit about their experience. What we started to do a few years ago is to think, well, or not even a few semesters ago, what are students doing outside of class that we know has value for them academically, but it's not on their transcript? We don't have a simple, single way to show what their experiences are across the university. And so we started using that to look just at what Randy Bass was talking about high-impact educational experiences. And especially this group of them, because these are things that are all very academic and very important, in each of them in a different major, but all very important, but also generally not tracked in a systematic campus way. So capstone projects, or in the senior survey we ask, well, senior integrative experiences. It might not be strictly a capstone that the curriculum offers, but a project they do that's integrative. We ask them, did you take a course that offered credit for community-based service learning? Because we wanted to distinguish that from just, certainly there are students doing lots of volunteerism. It's not always academic. So we say, well, you took a course that awarded credit for community service. You had a diversity or global learning experience that had academic credit involved. And for many of our students, every day on campus is a diversity experience. We didn't want to just say the experience of being diverse. We want to say, did you have an academic experience that gave you credit for somehow being in diversity or global learning? Likewise, internships, field-based learning, and undergrad research. Again, undergrad research that was outside of a class requirement for a professor, because we wanted, at first when we said, did you do research as undergraduate, 95% will say, yes, of course, because everybody does research papers. And we wanted to distinguish, the research you do that's outside of a class, but you're mentored, and it's part of your program, but it might not be a part of a course. So we started to say, did you have these experiences here? I'm going to add, just to point out too, these are not the only things that get called high-impact practices, and we have some other things Randy Bass mentioned, writing intensive courses, active and collaborative learning. These have these same kind of high-impact effect on students. We didn't ask about those in part because those are often just tied to courses. And so they vary with however a given instructor teaches a course. We wouldn't really know where they were, and they're more integrated in ways that these are not. So we focused on these 5. Actually, on our campus, we're kind of getting some national attention because we've started to be able to point out that the learning benefits that come from these high-impact practices actually can be associated with things like leadership development and being in a good peer mentoring program, and even student employment when you have a mentor who's coming back to you with questions about how is this helping you move through your academic career. And so we're starting to see some of the same learning gains and retention and benefits even from these kinds of things. But again, we didn't ask about those. We're just looking at these 5. And you're always careful when the keynote speaker gives his list of defining things, and you have your own. I think we agree at what these are. But if you look across these, what they have in common, okay, they depend on knowledge and abilities that students are developing in their courses, and they challenge them to integrate. Okay. These are things that take people, I'm going to integrate things, I'm going to extend it, I'm going to deepen it, but beyond the place where I first learned it. And again, whether it's in a community service project, a new independent research project outside of where they learned their research training, but it's taking them further. And interestingly, these are all things that incorporate engagement with people who don't share the student's same knowledge and background. And as we looked across these things, they all do broadly defined, because certainly if you're doing community-based service project, you're out in a community where these people didn't take the classes you took. They haven't taken the same test. If you're going to talk to what you know, you have to talk to people who don't share that background. Even an undergrad research project, as you bring it to the point of disseminating it, you're talking to people who didn't do your research. You're talking to people who didn't have the experience you did. So all of these are asking students to take what they've learned in a course and build on it, extend it, broaden it, bring it to people who don't share what they already know. So it's really asking them to do things with their knowledge beyond just show that they've got it. There is, and this last thing, is we know from now a pretty good record of national studies, we get a demonstrated positive effect on student persistence, student learning, student engagement for students who participate in these. So these are pretty positive, important things for student learning at the university. The other thing, so here the 5 are alphabetical order. The other thing we have in common is we don't keep track of them. We know we have them going on all over the place. We know faculty members who are taking the lead on them. We have some people that could be national examples on how to make this a successful part of your curriculum, but who knows what we have. So we started in 2013 in the fall to put these on the senior, of our 10 questions, that's pretty precious real estate, 5 of them ask, did you do these things or not? We just want to know, and we don't have another central way that we know. We also, a little bit after that, started doing another campus-wide survey called the Student Experience in the Research University. We've done that a couple times now. There we get about 1/4 of our students answering. It's a much broader survey, but it includes questions about these. But it was very gratifying now that we've done that to see that from a full census of our students, 1/4 of them responding, the numbers of participation are virtually the same as when we get 95% of people on the senior survey. So we feel like we can have some confidence in what they're telling us here. We also, during that academic year, with the help of a grad student, I sent him around to every undergrad program on campus and asked, maybe some of you talked to him and said, does your department have this? You know, is it required? Maybe it's not required, but you encourage students to do it. You know, actually some of them, they say, well, they don't fit in because of the structure of our curriculum means they'd get out of sequence if they took a semester abroad. You know, so we just said, what's the census? Where do we have these? Where do we encourage them? Where do we actually not have room for them? And so what we did, just to give you a preview, if you had to guess, which one of these things do you think is most common for University of Iowa graduating seniors? Research? Internship? Any other votes? Okay, I'll give you the rank order. Is actually internships and practicum kinds of experiences are the most common thing among our graduates. Capstone courses or integrated projects follow that. Then service learning comes in, and undergrad research right after that. So this is just doing a yes or no, did you experience these things? And so this is the order in which they say yes. Would you want to guess percentages for any of these? How many of our students do you think actually report doing these things? Actually, I'm going to, now, instead of everybody telling me, talk to the person at your table. I'll give you about 30 seconds and think, what are some plausible estimates for about how many of our students do these, or at least the top couple if you don't want to try all of them. Okay, so would anyone like to give me your best estimate on internships and related? 50%? Okay. Anybody want to give me a guess on a capstone kind of experience? 40? Okay, well, we know it's less. Others, 10 on community service learning? 20? Feel like an auction here. Okay, well, I just get a sense of it. This is the rank order, and here's what we get. So 60% of our, 95% of our seniors responding, 61%, they're telling us they've had some kind of internship or practicum or field experience in their undergrad experience. 40, Oh, wait for my next slide. Yeah, and again, 43% are saying they're in some kind of capstone or integrative experience. 20, and this isn't actually a tie. There's about a 0.2% difference, so that's why service learning is a little bit higher than undergrad research, but they seem to be virtually the same. Now that we've got 3 full semesters of graduating seniors, they've held pretty steady there. And international or cross-cultural, and who would have 1/4 of our students? Well, actually, if you're in international programs, you would say, of course, but the rest of us, that was actually quite a surprise to me, that our students have that much international experience. But as you said, if we look at, so when you take that, 83%, 4 out of 5 of our students are getting at least one of these experiences. One of these things we consider high impact integrative learning experiences, but actually more than half tell us they say yes to 2 or more of those. Okay. Actually 3 or more. So, no. So, I mean, I think the story is our students are, we may or may not have centered our curriculum around these things. Our students are finding them. Notice have more, so, 1 out of 4 of our students is opting into 3 or more of these experiences as undergrads. And we haven't, potentially, and so with my 5 out of my 10 questions I get to ask, we don't have a lot of more fine-grained work on this, but I think you're right, and I know in some departments, in fact, they're doing a community-based research project, which is service. If students counted that twice, I would say, well, sure. I'm not going to, that's part of why we, the parts we did, we were very careful to define that these were things associated with academic credit as part of their curriculum. So that we did want to distinguish them from, as I said, just doing a research paper in a course like I do in many, or doing volunteerism because I'm in a philanthropic group that does that. We said they're all academic. But if they had an experience that counted in their minds and they said yes to both, we haven't sorted that out. It would not be difficult to go in and say, well, are the psych students all picking the same combination, and maybe that means it's a single thing they're counting, because I can match to the record, and we just haven't, nobody's asked me yet, so we could do that. Going a little bit further, as I said, we did this census, because I also wanted to say, well, maybe students are just doing what we're making them do. So before we make too much of this, where departments really expect this, and where is it purely optional? So these are the departments where these things are required. Now the unit of analysis is departments here, so 23% requires some kind of internship and practicum. And if you think of it, well, this will include all of our nursing students, all of our social work students, all of our education students, because that's just built into their curriculum, but many others as well. Likewise, at Capstone, as you can imagine, these tend to be smaller departments. So even though it's more than half the departments, it probably doesn't account for more than half students. There are a couple of departments that have courses that are required for the major that have a service learning piece. If you're in that major, you can't graduate without it. So yeah, that's required. Likewise, there are a couple, research is a little bit harder to distinguish because sometimes research is not technically required for a degree, but it's required for a degree with honors. And so again, the boundaries might be fuzzy on that. We haven't dug much further, but clearly not widespread. So we also say, so where is it explicitly encouraged? Where it's actually in the documentation, maybe when a student's reading about their curriculum, they say, well, no, you don't have to do this, but we really like our students to have this experience. And when we put in where it's encouraged, we get a lot more promotion. Departments are saying, at least at this time, we're not going to require you to do study abroad, but we encourage our students to do that. Nobody's saying you can't graduate without it, but we really encourage it. So again, we see, even though it's not required, it is getting some attention. People are drawing attention. Now, when I look at, so here's what we did, is I looked at all of the students who said, yes, I had that experience, and then I just did a count. Which departments are they in? And so the percent of departments where students are doing this, well, about 90% of our departments require or encourage an internship or practicum, and about 90% do it. 60% encourage or require some sort of capstone, but 90% of our students are finding them. 35% encouraging or requiring service learning. But in 80% of our departments, students are finding that. You know, research with a professor, you see, but in 90% of our departments, students are finding undergrad research experiences. And like, you know, in 80% of the departments, students are opting in to study abroad. So nobody, you know, in every case, just about, students are seeking these things out, whether or not we're pushing them into them. You know, so when we looked at this, we see a case where, boy, students are really important. Because the reward they're getting from them is they want to do these things. In relatively fewer cases are they doing it because they've been told they need to. So observations or other questions, because you can see this is a pretty 30,000-foot view of the data. Other things that come up, Bob? What? No. Yeah. Yeah, and clearly, so people are in departments where these are not expected, they're finding them. No. So yeah. So here, because these are the responses based on the responses. The purple is based on the responses of the students. Did you find this? We didn't ask them where. The shades of brown are based on the departments. Do they offer it or not? So a couple of oh, go ahead. Not from this, no. No, we wouldn't. And I don't have that much real estate. And so it would be probably only in the research group that would be. I wouldn't expect the others to be. Bob, did? Mm-hmm. Yeah, but likewise, I mean, there might be other forms of funding, you know, scholarships, study abroad, for example. So this data is just, did you have this experience as described, yes or no? And so they're the broadest level. So I'm going to give you my first round of takeaways, and then I would welcome any other suggestions or observations you have. But yeah, so we've got students opting into this to a great extent, whether or not they're required. And I think, so if at any of the tables this morning you came up with a question, well, we don't know if students really want to do this. Yes, no, the students are interested here. Students who take part in these are not the exception. So we're not just talking about the high achieving students, the highly motivated students who go look for things. 4 out of 5 are finding at least one of these. More than half are finding at least 2. So this is, you know, the exceptional ones are the ones who don't do these things. In almost all majors, at least some students are taking part at some point. And they vary. We had some discussion at our table. In some majors, that's a lot more shifted towards some kinds of experiences than others, as you'd expect. But in almost all majors, at least some students are taking part. And one more. So the question I've left with is, well, for those who don't, I think there would still be room to say, we don't really know why not. Because I could imagine there'd be students saying, you know, and I know for me, I didn't sign up for undergrad research because I didn't know undergrads could do that. And they found out at a later stage in their career where they didn't have the background they needed, it was too late for them. I didn't know I could do service projects. Some generally don't know. Some other obstacles is they work, and if they're not paid, this is time they can't afford to take away from it. So we can have, you know, there are some, but we actually just don't even know, are they just choosing not to do it? You know, we have students who just do the least they can do to get out. This data won't tell us, but I think it gives us some questions to say, the question of, do these matter to students? And do they take them when they find them is an awful lot of them, yes. And I think it would be, I'm curious next to see things like, for our students who are less likely to graduate in 4 or even in 6 years, where are they in this map? You know, are the students who are finding this, are they the ones who get connected more, you know, have more success? We don't know that yet. We know these things all have, as Randy Bass said, much positive effects for everybody, but even further positive effects for at-risk students. So are we getting the students who will benefit the most into them? You know, those are our next questions. We don't know, but we have them, and they're all over the place. So I would welcome any other comments, but I also want to watch our time. So thank you for your input on this, and please contact me if you have other questions about it. I think, are we on time? Yes.